Hey everybody, Zach Witovich here.
And I'm Charlie Burtwhistle.
Welcome to another episode of the Building Code.
Zach, it's not just any episode though, is it?
It's not.
I hear you have some news to share with our listeners.
That's right. To my amazing listeners out there that I've gotten the opportunity to chat with, meet in person, today is the last episode of the Building Code for myself.
Yep. Zach is moving on to bigger and better things, leaving all of us in the dust. Doesn't like hanging out with us anymore. No, obviously very, very excited for Zach. But he is moving on from Buildertrend.
That's right. And I just want to say to everybody that has ever listened to the Building Code, this was one of my favorite parts of my job. Charlie and I have talked about that all the time. It really always brought me a ton of joy. And honestly, I've learned a ton just talking to people about their businesses, and it's inspiring. And so I'm going to go out there and see what the world has and all the things that my listeners taught us and my customers at Buildertrend. So I couldn't be more thankful for the opportunities to be a podcast host. I'm like excited. I get to tell people that I once did that at, random parties or something or social events. But it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think not enough can be said about Zach and the impact you have had towards Buildertrend as a whole. But I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, specifically for the impact you've had on me and this podcast. I mean, you and I jumped into this, 3 years
Going
ago
on 3
now?
years. Kind of crazy.
With zero experience.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know each other at the time. And I'll always remember you took the time, texted me, and reached out. I was like, hey, sounds like we're going to be doing this podcast together. You want to go get lunch and get to know each other a bit? And so we went to Interrail down in Exarban and just kind of like fired off questions back and forth. So what's your family? Where do you live? How long have you been a Buildertrend? Stuff like that. And we kind of figured it out as we went. And figuring out how to do a podcast is not something that everyone gets the opportunity to go through, but I would definitely not have been able to do it by myself. And not just like as a friend and as a podcast host, but just as an expert in the industry. It's been an honor to sit beside you and learn from you, learn from our customers and the guests that we've had. Like, we released some pretty awesome episodes together, and I'll remember that forever. So obviously, thank you for everything you've done for Buildertrend and the podcast, but thank you for everything you've done for me as well.
Thanks, Charlie. It only took me leaving the pod for you to say something nice about me.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I know, and I didn't need the tissues that we have right there. I did get choked up a couple times there, but I got through it.
We kept that off on the edit, on backstage, the tears.
This will probably be the first nice thing I've ever said to you on the podcast. Kind of our running bit.
Yeah, we got to get a B-roll of all the best bits that Charlie took at Zach in order for our listeners out there.
To that point, and kind of a segue back on script that we're supposed to be talking about. Courtney Matern is going to be filling in for Zach as my co-host. You've definitely listened to her before. She's done a fantastic job filling in when Zach and I can't make it. Obviously very, very smart in the industry, and a fantastic person in general. So she will be a great co-host. So the podcast will continue with myself and Courtney. And the reason I said it was a good segue, we were talking about saying mean things. She's like, oh, at least you'll be nice to me. Zach's always mean to me when I fill in. And I'm like, that's not how this is going to go at all. You are replacing Zach. I will treat you exactly the way I treat Zach, which is not well.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. And, I'm going to continue to listen in and giving you guys lots of feedback in
please,
the comments,
absolutely,
as we would like to see.
As long as you like, review, and subscribe, that's all that matters.
That's right. Always pump those numbers, you data guy.
Well, thank you again, Zach. We'll get into the last episode here, but appreciate you.
That's right. Thanks, Charlie, for the kind words, and to all our listeners out there. Keep building, keep being you, keep being great in your communities. This is Zach Witovich signing off on the Building Code for the last time. Thank you. Hey everyone, Zach Witovich here for the Building Code. Flying solo today, which is A-okay. We're going to be just fine. I'm really excited to talk to Jordan Duggan. He's general manager of Caprock Design Build. He is down in Amarillo, Texas, where he is carrying the mission to talk about green and sustainable building techniques. He's really focused on educating himself and improving the products that he's bringing to his customers around green construction. And he's got a very fascinating story where he's really spent a lot of different elements of his career and kind of working his way up to a builder. So I want to kind of touch on a lot of the topics around green techniques, but Jordan also is really interested in talking about business sustainability. So we kind of got something for everyone today. I'm going to get him in here. Let's get it going. Hey, Jordan, welcome to the Building Code. It's great to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited for our topic today to kind of get into sustainable construction as well as sustainable business. You kind of mentioned that in our little pre-read of some topics we're going to go in through. And that's an interesting twist on that topic. We've had quite a few green builders or sustainable builders on, so I'd really love to get into that a little bit. Before we get to the tantalizing content, tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, your story. Just give us that kind of context of like your journey.
Sure. So, starting off as a kid, I was, fundamentally curious about everything. I think my parents got tired of me asking the question, why? It was not a simple answer because it was followed up by another why. And when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones and easy information to pick up like we do now. So either that's a difficult answer. Now my kids ask me that question. It's like, well, I don't know. Ask Siri. Let's look online. We'll figure it out. That's kind of where it starts with me. My parents had a lot of, at an early age, we moved a lot, remodeled houses. So again, that let me ask that question, learn those things early on. When I was younger, my dad was a bricklayer. So kind of had my involvement in the trades. Right out of high school, went and worked, did construction for our energy company here as a contractor doing dirt work. Then from there, I moved into, what's kind of more localized as our trades, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. I was a project manager for a company. Ended up getting my plumbing license. And from there, that moved to remodels, right? Those things all kind of go together and just made sense to collaborate all those things and take the whole project on. And then we started doing new construction. And that's when just kind of I had a passion that came about, a fire that was lit and realized, hey, this is what I really want to do. And then that fundamental curiousness that I had really took off. And that's where I kind of delve into the education side of it. And I've just loved it ever since.
That's an amazing story. I get the privilege to talk a lot of different people in the industry. They're not always so diversified in the experiences. Dirt work, all the way to the mechanicals to actually, running with a GC business. That's really interesting. Where did the sustainability kind of focus start to come in? Was it right away, or as you've kind of grown your business and you've grown your focus over time, is that more of where that, and you mentioned you were always curious, so you've just really been into like geology and like earth sciences, and it all just kind of came together?
So I'd say a big part of that started probably around that initial remodel phase, right? Every remodel, you start with demolition. So you're analyzing this building as you're taking it apart and wondering, how could this have been better? What caused the issue here? Why didn't this last long, or why did it last long? So that was kind of the initial start of it. From that point on, trying to educate myself further down the road, that's when I came across the Passive House Institute. Thought, hey, this is kind of a top tier or a really great way to get some really great knowledge. So I enrolled in that. Became a certified passive house builder. That really opened my eyes up to a whole nother level. There was things in that had never even crossed my mind as far as sustainability and the impact and importance that it can have.
Yeah. For those maybe that are a little less educated, because I think that's what it really comes down to, is educating people on what sustainability means. I think that term itself can have a lot of different connotations to it. So, how do you define sustainability construction? What does it mean to have, the Passive House Institute? What are the philosophies and best practices that they're promoting?
So in like a general summary, it's a building approach that you're minimalizing the environmental impact that construction process or that building has throughout its life cycle. So there's multiple ways of doing it, and it's a really broad question. It's not as simple as just, well, we're using, sustainable products, or we're using a low VOC paint. In fact, it doesn't even have to incorporate those two. It could be the details or the assemblies that you're putting together that just last a lot longer. It could be the details and assemblies that you're putting together to make the house healthier. It could be that it's also materials that you are using that are easily sustainable. They're not, dipping into our limited resources, or if they are, they're doing it in a very modest way. So that's kind of I guess the generalization of it, kind of what the people who do know a little bit about it would categorize it as.
Yeah. And how does that translate then into the decisions that you're making when it comes to building a project? It's like the cerebral, here's like the high level headliner of why these institutes exist and these philosophies around the building science elements of using green techniques. I'm sure that then has to go into the reality of running a business and the operations in the real world, and having that underlying philosophy obviously impacts like how you run the business and how you design your project. So like, what is that experience like, and what's that look like to a customer, to you, to your team? I know it's like, that's a lot. And then just opens the door up for some, you're like, geez, Zach, let me breathe.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a big topic. I think it gets dumbed down a lot to being oversimplified. Usually the first thing that we're looking at are the building assemblies. We'll talk with the customer, and we're doing all of our pre-construction up front, down to picking the last faucet fixture. We know what's going to go in that house before we even break ground. But back to the assembly part of that, we have options that we do, that we offer. Now, all of those are going to be focused toward making that building last longer than, let's say, the typical code built house next door built by somebody else. That's something that we kind of take pride on from the start. And so we educate our customers up front. In fact, the first meeting that we have, it's not really discussing what exactly they're wanting. It's discussing what our process is going to be like, and then kind of taking a little dip into these details of, hey, these are what we offer, and let me tell you why we offer these and what they're going to do for you. And going off that, one of the biggest kickbacks that we initially get when people hear what we're trying to do with a high performance building and being sustainable is, well, I don't want to spend my money on that. That's going to cost more than just if I have, option B, go build this house for me. And that's actually rarely the case. So there's a lot of education involved in that up front to let the customer know that it is a viable option and the benefits that they're going to be getting from that. It makes it a lot easier when we get to have that initial conversation to actually move forward with that project.
I love that. And as people that listen to the building code know, I'm not from the construction industry originally. And so I always find these opportunities for my own education just very beneficial to understand that. And I've gone and bought houses and built houses, and like my parents have built houses. And I think it's just interesting because I think that's even maybe an assumption in the building industry, is that these green options will add costs, and then people won't want to pay for them, and they don't want to have that conversation, or just, generally think when you think these types of conditions, there's just going to be an added cost to it. Right. So your approach is to even just educate customers as much as it is even to like really promote your brand and what you're doing with your business.
It is. And don't get me wrong, it is to promote my business, but I'm such an advocate of this field and the trades and what's going on right now. There's so many new products and so many new techniques that have been developed, and tested. So not new this year, but last, I don't know, call it 10, 15 years. We've got code developments that have come in and kind of really changed the game in the last few years. And that's kind of starting to sweep the country. But I'm open to educate, and I tell my customers this, let me have this conversation with you. And if you do want to take this information down to another builder and because you hit it off and you love it, that's great. I feel like I've done my job as far as passing that information on and making you more aware of what you're getting into and how I can help you. So it is for brand promotion for us, but it's more of just let's share the knowledge, you know?
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because even if there is a slightly added cost to it, you're talking about a lot of times longer term cost savings, like whether you're more passive on the grid. So you're not paying for heating and air, or even just the health benefits, right? Like cleaner air in the house. And if you have medical conditions, it's just going to make you health is wealth, right? And just kind of live with yourself. So it's not even just about the structure. It's also about your well-being, because houses aren't just assets and commodities that you buy, sell, and trade. Like they're intended to fulfill a human need, right? Like why not want to live in the best version of it? Because it isn't just an investment to like pass along to someone else someday.
Absolutely. Yeah, I compare this to the automotive industry a lot because there's a lot of relatable items in there. You know, everybody wants to know what the ROI is. Nobody really goes to the dealership, you know, and looks at a new pickup and is like, what's my return on this investment going to be? Well, in a sense, some companies do. It's a workhorse for them and they'll factor that in, but the general public doesn't. The people that are buying that vehicle for themselves, you know, they're going to factor in that, hey, yeah, I want the heated steering wheel, the heated seats, the air conditioned seats, the sunroof, the big rims. It's all these things that they add on, and they do it just because they want it. Right.
Right.
Same with the gym membership. You know, you can buy some weights, work out from home. It's a one-time cost, or you can pay for that gym membership. It's all about being healthy at that point, but are you looking at the ROI on that? It seems to be like the home industry is the one thing that is solely focused on ROI. And I understand that. And so we try to accommodate to it. We do let the customer know, like, hey, you know, if you do this, this is an ROI feature. This is something that you will get a return on. It will pay off in X amount of years, or whatever that situation is. And there's some features that are just strictly for comfort and health. No, you're not going to get any more money out of this house when you sell it if you're to do this. But you're going to be healthier, you're going to enjoy it more, and you're going to love it when you're home. So we really do try to decipher between those and present those options out there.
I love it. And you kind of talked about this is infused from the design pre-construction process throughout the building. What are some of those techniques that are your most popular, or the ones that you're seeing people naturally gravitate towards? Or personally, what are the ones you really like to put in homes because you know it's a great ROI in various ways?
Sure. So one of the, probably my favorite one that I really focus on, it's the air control layer of the house. You know, we've been putting insulation in house for a long time. And if that house has wind blowing through it, that insulation is null and void at that point. It's like putting on a fluffy fleece jacket. When you go outside and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour, that jacket's worthless. And it's the same with the house. So if you're going to spend money on insulation, let's make sure that it's being installed correctly and you're protecting that insulation so it can actually do its job. The other part of that is, you know, look at the mechanical side of it. You're either pumping hot air or cold air into that house. Well, if that air is just leaking out of the house, there's your efficiency, there's your comfort, right? So tighten that house up. All of a sudden your mechanicals get a lot smaller. They get a lot more efficient and the house is more comfortable. And then on the back end of that, you know, the one that I really enjoy talking about, and it's an extra benefit that's not even really thought about. You take care of those two items that make sense on the financial side, but then the other side of it is, hey, now the house is really healthy. We can bring in filtered fresh air. We can take out stale air. You know, and I use this term a lot. Air is the number one consumed. It's a fluid that we have in our body, right? In and out every single day, every single second of the day throughout sleep. So most of the things that are in air that cause health related problems, we cannot see. We have no idea that it's happening. It takes a long time for it to happen. And then we have these side effects.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that we've got, a HEPA filter, or just say like a MERV 13 filter, right? Just a really good air filter coming into that fresh air that's taking a lot of that out of the fluid that we're ingesting. That's got a very long-term health benefit to it. So you may not consider it an ROI. It could be, but it's definitely going to be more enjoyable, and it's got a big benefit that's not really talked about very much.
Yeah, totally. I recently just got back from a trip to Michigan where we slept in a 130-year-old house, and let me tell you, I would love a little clean air, and it was 100 degrees and no insulation, so it was like sleeping in a sauna at night. It was wild, and I was like, "Where? I need some building technology. We got to make this house forward a little bit. I need to pass along some choices to my family there."
It was a little more than a camping trip, huh?
Yeah. It was wild, but working in the construction tech industry now, I was like, I know one of my builders can bring something to bring this house a little more forward. Some fresh air sound nice. You kind of touched on this, or we talked about this in the pre, and I would love to kind of get into this topic. A lot of our listeners are business owners, and they're looking for ways to improve their operations and the way they do things. And you mentioned the concept of business sustainability. So, let's talk about that. Educate me and our listeners. When you use that term, what are you referring to, and kind of what's your philosophy on that side of things?
So this is something that I've become more and more passionate about. As far as running this business has opened my eyes up to it quite a bit. I had always heard the stat that like 80% of construction businesses fail, and you call it the first 3 years, first 5 years. The number always changes. So I got curious about this, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics say that only 56% of construction trades in general, whether it's HVAC, drywall guys, plumbing, home builders, whatever it is, they're lump summing that together. Only 56% make it 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a gamble. That's kind of crazy to think about. Going on further, only 26% make it 10 years. And then only 17% make it 22 years or after, right? So it's like you got a 1 in 5 shot that you can actually thrive in your business and either sell it, hand it off, whatever, but call it a successful business by the time your career's over with. What's enticing about that? There's so many other jobs that people can do. And it's like, okay, well, where it starts is you've got a guy that's working in a trade. Let's use a plumber for an example. He starts out with a apprentice card, moves to journeyman, gets his master's. He's like, you know what? I can do this. I can be a business owner. Well, that's great. We've trained him to be a really good plumber, but nobody's ever talking about actually running the business. There's very few schools that are designed for that, for the construction trades, to help people along with it. And it's not talked about very much. We've got this push for, the trades making a comeback, right? Not necessarily taking the 4-year path to college anymore, and getting getting yourself into a big student loan debt that doesn't necessarily even come into function when you do go get your job. So that's really picked up in the last, I don't know, maybe last decade. And I think it is making a comeback. We've had, I think for every 5 plumbers, we get the 5 plumbers that are retiring, we got 2 to replace them, right? So we've had the shortage, and I think it's starting to actually come back around.
Mm-hmm.
But those plumbers or HVAC techs or framers or whoever they are never really have a chance to succeed without a little bit of implementation of some sort of building knowledge. And so that's something I'm passionate about. I try to, I'm involved with our local builder association. We have a school here in town that's for high school students that helps them learn trades and become even certified in some of them by the time they graduate high school. Our local college here is the same thing. But I'm really having a lot of conversations with them right now. Like, hey, let's focus on, project management and what it takes for that company to actually succeed long term, to know that they're going to make the margins that they need to make, to survive and not just feel like they're billing out what they should be billing out because it's what they heard from somebody else, or compared to the next plumber next door is only charging $150 a service call. Why? Why are they charging that? And is it working? And would it work in your model? And how do you build that model? And that's something that I think when we get that education out there, we're really going to see a rise in the trades.
I totally agree. I think it's just the culture shift around what people think of construction, right, is a little bit reciprocal, even going back, 100 years ago, right? People like built their own homes and, ordered it on the Sears catalog, right? Like they kind of was like part of life was like figuring out a way to make that happen. And then it became a more professional industry. And that generation is still in a lot of ways, like still working in construction. And so it's like it takes time to get new blood into it. And technology can certainly help facilitate some of that, but we're still human. We still need people promoting the value of going into construction in the schools, in communities, in forums like this. So that's really amazing in Amarillo. Do you know of other builders that also have a similar philosophy in your area? Like how far is what's your dream of that reach? And I've had plenty of other guests talk about similar things like this too. There's a ton of great organizations out there.
I mean, we have a decent sized builder association for the size of Amarillo. And we do have a lot of the builders that are building around here that are involved. A lot of them are on the board. Some of them are on our, executive branch of the board. So they've got a lot to do with it, and they're open to having that conversation and having that public outreach to where we are, talking to the people that we can easily get in contact with, our colleges and schools where we can have a direct impact. We haven't branched out much outside of that. We've talked about, maybe starting a builder association podcast, something like that, where we can actually get some of that information outside of our face-to-face conversations. I think it's a great way to be able to share that information to people who are looking into it. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It's pretty localized right now, but we do have a pretty good tight knit of people who are working toward that I'm excited about.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, even things like green technology and the usage of that is localized too. It's a little bit of a grassroots thing, given the nature of the way housing markets work. There isn't like a national market of houses you can buy outside of like the big guys, right? Like the DR Hortons of the world. So it takes that kind of like earnest focus on like, we need to find people in our communities that we can educate about best building practices, as well as like why you should go have a career, because it isn't just swinging the hammer either, right? It's like having that high level understanding of what good building is, how you use green techniques to build a great product, but also run a business so you can continue to do that. And that's really dynamic. That was like one of the things I've always admired about, as I've kind of learned, is that there is very few industries like construction, because there are so many different elements that actually make it function and work. It's business ownership, it's marketing, it's building, it's, skilled art almost in a lot of ways. It's just pretty incredible to see people like you day in and day out really championing that cause. Kind of anything else from a business sustainability aspect that you
well,
kind of have perspective?
We're here. We're talking about Buildertrend at some point, right? That's
I always love a plug.
Something I wanted to touch on. Yeah, it's when I had the conversation with our local high school, we don't call it our trades high school here. So we have several high schools throughout Amarillo, and these kids have an opportunity to get bussed in and go to a really premier. It's actually called Amtech. Might as well give them a plug too, because they did an excellent job. They let them come in and they learn whether it's HVAC, electrical, plumbing, framing, machining, welding, paint and body. I mean, they have all kinds of opportunities that are excellent for these kids to get out of high school and go straight to the workforce. So it's really good for the community because we're supplying talent that's been trained. And these kids are passionate about it because they've been introduced early on instead of trying to figure it out later on in life. Through my story, you kind of heard that it took me a while to figure out I wanted to be a home builder. And it's because nobody told me I could do that. I didn't know I could be a project manager or superintendent, or it just wasn't even offered. It wasn't even an option. But what we're proposing to them is like, hey, let's take Buildertrend and let's teach these kids. It's an excellent business learning opportunity to be able to take this software, run a simulated project through it, look at what our potential costs would be, what our profit could be, how to schedule something out. At this point now we've got takeoff on there. There's so many attributes that software offers that it's huge for these kids to learn, and it's not industry specific. It's like you kind of learn the way that the bits and pieces of this work, and you can take it anywhere you want to go. So yeah, maybe you are studying to be an electrician or studying to be a framer, and Buildertrend's great and it can help you start your business. But you can take that skill set and completely pivot and go do something else like IT management. And it's the same type of concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's so many doors open when you acquire those skills. We're about up against the clock. So something I wanted to ask kind of back on the green building techniques. I think in the last, I've been working at Buildertrend for over half a decade at this point, and early on it didn't come up as much, but more and more it's become more prominent. People are coming to us with this perspective on green building and building science and building code, right? Nice plug for the pod there. What's the next 5 to 10 years look like? Does this snowball keep on rolling? Do you kind of like, what's that growth trajectory on the green technique and building trends?
So like product wise, I think manufacturers are going to kind of take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. If they're not finding sustainable resources, they're not going to last in the game. That's where we're moving. Most of them are doing a really good job. You hear the bad, you don't often hear the good. I mean, our lumber here is actually really sustainable, and we're doing really innovative things with it to minimize waste, and make it more efficient, more durable, and have more uses. I think that our codes are also pushing for this. Something I see in the near future, I don't know if it'll be the next 5 years. I think we'll have a lot more houses that are not these expensive 5,000 square foot houses. Maybe they're downsizing to something that's designed well and fits their needs. We've done remodels on houses that are 4,500 square foot. And by the time we start to do the remodel on, it's like, man, well, what do we do with the other 1,500 square foot? Because we've met all your needs. And so, I think design will have some changes that help sustainability. Yeah, that's kind of my best answer. It's a really broad question of where it's going to go, and nobody really can see into the future. But I think between products, codes pushing where we're going, and design changes, that's going to have a huge impact on sustainability in the future.
And the reality is there's a lot of economic opportunity in these evolutions too. And so as the housing industry has the shortages, right, that make it hard to get into the housing market, and you look at the ways that you can start to innovate in the construction industry, it's like finding these sustainability things over time will create new jobs, new economic prospects for individuals going into construction. To your point about business sustainability, bringing talent in. But I think it's also really exciting to see how things will become a lot more technologically impressive in what they can do. Like there's who knows, like AI running your thermostat based on the weather patterns, and like we're kind of there, but like your imagination runs wild, right? So like it's kind of hard to know like what's 5-10 years look like. It's like, honestly, who does know? Nobody. But I'm really excited to see what builders are saying because they're the ones closest to it day to day. And I think the best part about it is I know we're going to see some incredible things that people build that are going to last for decades, centuries, but also are like benefiting the people living there and the planet, which is really, really exciting.
Absolutely.
Jordan, last question in the Thunderdome today. Just been hitting you. What advice would you give other construction professionals when it comes to their sustainability, both building and business?
I think, first and foremost, I think passion kind of runs this world. If you're passionate about it, hang in there. Things are going to come and be good. That's the driving force that makes things work. But my advice would be educate yourself as much as you can. It's so free. My phone here, 98% of the world's known information is accessible on that phone within seconds. So to not be constantly educating yourself and upping your game, that's a grave mistake. You've got all the opportunity in the world to do whatever you want to do with that information. And that's new technology. That's just like you're talking about. Where are we going to be in 5 years? Well, there's no telling because of what we're capable of doing with this. So that's my advice to everybody else. Educate yourself as much as possible. Try to implement those practices that you learn, and don't stop.
I love it. Jordan, thank you so much for being on the Building Code today. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you. Word on the street is you may be dabbling in your own podcast world. You want to tell anybody who want to learn more about where they can maybe listen to more of these topics and guests that you bring on?
Yeah, so we're working on it. We're very new to the podcast world. However, the passion that I have, that's a way I get to kind of get some of that information out there and potentially reach a client that's not face to face with me. So we have the BuildWise podcast. It's also on YouTube. It's all the main channels. But we'll bring in special guests and have the ideas to have weekly topics. Of course, running a construction company starts to get in the way.
You're just a little busy.
But I do enjoy it. I love it. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Our website's caprockdb.com. If somebody wants to reach out, is interested in being on the show, we'd be happy to have them. But yeah, Zach, thank you very much. I've been so excited to be a part of this and love what you guys do. I know you're well into the 200s on podcasts for Building Code. I think I've listened to every one of them. Doing a great job.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And definitely would appreciate our listeners out there checking out your podcast as well. Jordan, thank you so much for being on the Building Code. We will see you again, I'm sure.
Thanks.
We just had Jordan Duggan, general manager at Caprock Design and Build, talking a little bit all things in construction. We hit everything. We talked about how you get into construction, why talent should join the construction. We talked about green energy and green sustainability, best business practices, something for everybody in today's episode. And it's always really interesting to hear people talk about these things because there are a lot of different ways that you can operate your construction business, and every decision that you make about how you do that ultimately feeds into ways to acquire customers and the different customers you're looking to serve. And then there's this higher level of really being an industry leader on the leading edge of what a great construction company looks like. And so Jordan down in Amarillo is absolutely crushing it. And I found it really inspiring to kind of hear, it's bigger than even just the building process. It's about, creating the economic opportunity for people to come into the construction industry, to grow their skill set so that they can do whatever they want in life, but also, impact things like the planet's long-term sustainability with net zero building and passive building techniques. And it all kind of ties together, and it really creates this amazing opportunity to change the way the world builds, right? Which is ultimately Buildertrend's entire mission statement as a company. So I really appreciate you, Jordan, joining us today, kind of getting into your perspective. Make sure you check out his podcast, the Buildwise podcast, and you can also find them on www.com, caprockdb.com. Thank you so much, Building Code listeners. I know it's flying solo today, so I really appreciate hanging with us. We'll be sure to have other people with us here on the Building Code. Make sure the banter keeps on flying. But for now, I'm going to leave it. Like, comment, subscribe, Building Code. Thank you so much for being listeners. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching the video. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel for exclusive content brought to you by Buildertrend.